Gear Tasting Radio is brought to you by Imminent Threat Solutions. ITS provides knowledge that empowers individuals with indispensable skill sets to explore the world and prevail against all threats. Right now, as a special thank you for all podcast listeners, we're offering 10% off in the ITS store. Simply use the code GTR to save 10% at store.itstactical.com. Welcome to Gear Tasting Radio, where we offer an in-depth look into the usage and philosophy behind the equipment in our lives. Today, I'm joined, as always, by Rob Henderson.
Hello.
And myself, Brian Black. And we have a special guest today, Mike Ritland. How's it going, Mike?
Good, fellas. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us, man.
Oh, it's a pleasure being here. I always enjoy coming. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely, man. So first, I want to start off with just a little bit of your background for those of you that aren't familiar with who Mike Ritland is. If you want to give a little dive in there.
Yeah, so I spent a little over 12 years in the SEAL teams, and it was kind of at a good time to be in, I guess, in terms of staying busy from '96 to 2008. And for me, it was I kind of grew up in the Navy. I mean, from 18 to 30. So I did that, and while I was there, I was exposed to some working canines, and having grown up as a dog guy. That's what sparked my interest, is already having a fair bit of experience, and then seeing them do what they did back in 2003. That's when I kind of dove headfirst into the military or police working dog capacities. From then until 2008, I just did everything I could to learn more, train with everybody I could, attend whatever seminar, read every book, video, you name it, and then got out, started my own company. I started the Warrior Dog Foundation to retire former special operations and police and contract working dogs, and then also do a little bit of everything in terms of the industry norms. We do a little bit of breeding, we do some importing, we do training, consulting, run handler courses, run regular training courses, teach seminars. But it's kind of a one-stop shop, but a medium-sized kennel. And then we also offer an online training platform for average everyday dog owners. It does benefit and I think is good for your normal canine handler, but it's geared towards your average everyday dog owner. So that's MikeRitland.com. It's a monthly training lesson, and we'll actually drop an ITS code for 15% off for all the listeners and subscribers for ITS. But that's kind of the gist of it going on right now. I've written a few books also. One of them's Trident Canine Warriors. That was my first one, which is kind of an in-depth look into the use of dogs in special operations, how they're trained, breeds that are used, etc., missions they go on. And then Team Dog, which is a basic training. It's more of a philosophy or principle type book than it is a manual, but and so we do that, or I've done that also, but that's kind of the gist of it.
Cool, man. Well, I love the way the Trident Canine Warriors book came across too. That was my favorite out of the two. I read Team Dog too, and I really got a lot out of both books. But I think Trident Canine Warriors was really interesting to hear your story of how you got involved with that, and kind of how the working dog program in the military kind of came about too. So
yeah, well, I appreciate it.
It was very cool. And then the online training is something I'm really interested, just from kind of a personal aspect. I've had a Doberman for a couple of years now, and we've had Dobermans in our family for probably 10 years now, and I'm definitely fond of the breed, but I've never really taken it to the next level with training stuff, and I'm very interested to kind of get into that. And I've been looking at that training program for a while, but kind of describe that from just kind of the gist of what people could take from that program and learn.
Sure.
Like with the applications.
Yeah, so this website was kind of spawned out of all of the traveling and speaking and seminars and things that I do aren't just for police dog handlers, military handlers. I mean, I do fundraisers and just a whole host of different interactions with a lot of normal, average, everyday citizens. And what I found was, that the questions that I get asked, the problems that people have are very consistent. It's pretty much across the board, whether it's an active guy that likes to take his dog hiking and is having issues, or the soccer mom that can't get the lab to stop jumping on grandma, or all of these basic behavioral problems are the same or largely the same, a lot of similarities. And number two, and probably more importantly, is that they all generally stem from the exact same issues. And the philosophy behind all of it stems from my experience on the working dog side, and realizing very quickly that training is training, psychology is psychology. What A and B are in terms of your training criteria or goals really is irrelevant. How you get there is the same. No different than a coach with his athletes, a teacher with the students, parents with their children, boss with their employees. The principles and constants that exist psychologically with animals, humans, dogs, horses, you name it, are all very, very similar. And so when you break it down more again on a kind of a philosophy or methodology standpoint, I think it's imperative that you understand that portion of it first. It's understanding why more so than just how, and I think that's where a lot of people fall flat, is that they just want, just tell me how to get my dog to sit.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. It's like, saying, just tell me how to get my son to be a world champion boxer. Like, well, there's not just one thing that's going to do that. It's a multitude of things. And just like with everything in my life, I'm, anal retentive to the point of almost annoying.
You're preaching to the choir.
Yeah,
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, so, to me, and that's really the secret with life. You can do it right, or you can be lazy. That's really kind of what it boils down to with anything. I don't care if it's dog training, shooting, being in shape, martial arts, being good at your job, you're a carpenter, whatever. If you want to be good at it, you got to work your ass off and put the time in and pay attention to the little things. That's what, in my opinion, separates people who are truly good at their craft versus everybody else, is people that pay attention to all of the little things. It's the little things that add up to the big picture. And a lot of times people just want to take a shortcut, and they think that a dog is different than a child or a human or whatever in terms of how you train, and the reality is that they're not, with one huge exception. And this is where I spend a lot of time explaining it early on in the training platform, is that the communication aspect. How human beings communicate is very different. We're very verbal and we're very visual. We use a language to communicate, a verbal oral language. And so just understanding or realizing that, dogs don't talk, they don't communicate the way we communicate. Do they use visual cues? Yeah, absolutely. But they're nonverbal, no different than if you think about how powerful body language is to human beings. It's not what you say, it's how you say it, what you're doing with your body. You can see somebody from across a parking lot that's having a bad day. You can see somebody, 300 yards away that's ecstatic. You can tell when a couple's arguing or they're badly in love, without hearing a word they're saying. And so if you think about, even though as verbal and visual as we are in terms of how we communicate, it's still that easy for us to identify those things. Now put yourself in a dog's shoes where you don't talk at all.
Yeah.
And so you then start to realize how important body language and nonverbal communication is. It's everything, and so the other side of that coin is that, and this is something when I mention it, most people are like, well, I never thought of that, is that, dogs do not think in a language, the way we do. And so you think your dog is thinking X, Y, and Z using words. They don't think that way. They think of a dog's mind like a calculator. Is really the gist of it. Is there's almost basic algebra going through your dog's mind all the time.
Like door shutting plus person walking in equals food.
Yeah, A plus B equals C for everything.
Interesting.
And so that's how you create your communication platform with a dog, is that you build context and you create these equations to the dog, and you have to be consistent with them. That's on the training side, which I think is kind of self-explanatory, and when you look at it that way, it makes sense. So
it does.
So the importance is consistency. There is that if it's right, it's always right. If it's wrong, it's always wrong. At first, when you're building and shaping those foundations of saying, this is what I'm trying to get my dog to do, or this is what I'm trying to get them to not do. The most important aspect prior to understanding that is also just the relationship. Is that, dogs' currency is engagement, it's affection, it's time. You may sit around all day at work and be thinking about your dog and what you're going to do, what you'd like to do, what you want him to get him to do, that you love him. He's not thinking about you, unfortunately. as much as you want to think he is, he's not.
Yeah.
Where he's going to value you is spending the time with him. And the analogy I like to use is, and you see it, unfortunately, a lot in today's day and age, go to a playground and you see parents and you see there's usually not a lot of gray area. There's either some dude sitting on the bench on Facebook and his kids could get kidnapped and he wouldn't recognize it for 5 minutes. Or you've got the dad out there that's playing tag and pushing them on the swing and screaming and going down the slide with them, to explaining, what did you do this afternoon? I took my kids to the park. But those are two disparately different things, and the way that the child views them are two disparately different things too, and so you have to keep that at the forefront, is that you're building your relationship with your dog, and the ultimate goal is that you can't make them want to be with you. You can't make them want to be loyal to you. You have to earn that, both respect, loyalty, affection, desire for engagement, all of those things. You can't make them do it. You've got to get them to consciously decide that that's what they want. And so you've got to build and build trust and spend time with them and use that as kind of their currency to get that out of them. So it's those two things combined that if you do them, if you focus on the relationship, again, just like a spouse, a child, a coworker, whatever, and then be consistent and thinking of how the dog thinks and shaping and conforming and conditioning these behaviors and then ultimately reinforcing them is the name of the game. And so with this training platform, it's cumulative, but it's also for the long term. It's not, hey, in 3 weeks you're going to get your dog to do this. It's the life of the dog, and so every month there's a new lesson, but it for most of the first year, it's very principled in the things that I just talked about. It's doing exercises that, to somebody that just wants, I want the 3-week, basic obedience package. This isn't for you. This is, I want to understand my dog. I want him to understand me. I want to know how to communicate to him. And I want to be able to do it with other people's dogs. It's the life of the dog. It's a lifetime investment. It's not the quick fix. And frankly, there is no quick fix, because people want to send their dogs to me all the time and say, hey, can you do a 6-week training? Yeah, I can, but it's not going to work for you very well because you don't understand how to maintain it. And so that's kind of the gist of it. And my goal with it was a couple of things. Was number one is to be different, not just for the sake of being different. I mean, one of my favorite pictures is a picture of an axe that's in reverse. It's a metal handle with a wood head, and it says, "Just because you're unique doesn't mean that you're useful."
Yeah, I like that.
And I think that's I think a lot of times in our society things are born out of the desire to want to be different, at the expense of being useful. So I wanted it to be different, not just for the sake of being different, but for the sake of every other training video series that I see, and this isn't relegated just to dog training. I see it in shooting. Workouts, anything, is that they're very polished, they're finished products. They don't show mistakes. They don't show the first time I tried this and it didn't go how I wanted. And so I wanted it to be very raw, very unscripted. I hate to use the word organic, but that's really the case, is that
crunchy.
Free range.
Is that when you're seeing me do these things with a lot of these dogs and a lot of these scenarios, it's the first time I've done it with them, and it doesn't go right.
Yeah.
Because that's how it's going to go for you. Is that when you encounter and your timing is off, or the dog doesn't understand what's being asked of it, that doesn't look like a dog that's done it a million times. And that, to me, that's the most frustrating thing about trying to learn on videos, is that it's like, yeah, you make it look easy and it goes well. What about when the dog doesn't do it? Or what about when it doesn't go how you planned? And so, my videos are very dirty. They're not polished. They're not, scripted. There's times where you may hear me swear or get frustrated or say, well, I screwed that up.
Yeah.
I want it in there, for all those same reasons, is so that, one, you realize that nobody's perfect. Shit happens with everybody, including me. Dogs aren't robots, and it doesn't always go as planned. In fact, it rarely goes as planned, just like Murphy's Law dictates with everything. But,
yeah, sure.
And so, the first good portion of the first year kind of focuses on that kind of stuff. And as it gets further down into the end of this first year, we've just finished filming our 11th month or lesson that'll drop July 1st. And we're starting to get more into now that you understand the nuts and bolts of the dog's mind and the relationship and the principles. Now this is how I actually apply them in showing things like dogs pulling on a leash, keeping dogs from showing dog aggression, how to heel dogs properly, all these types of things above and beyond kind of the basic stuff.
Cool.
And how I'm using these principles to actually employ them. But
that's great, man. I'm excited to start that myself because I've been looking into that for a while, and I'm gonna give that a shot too because I need to start doing something, and I know a lot of it's training myself as well. So.
Well, and like you said, I really like the concept of you're talking about the why because I think that the baseline understanding lets you understand even the training material more thoroughly.
Yeah. Because
if you understand what your ultimate goal is and how like you said, the dog's mind, like I've never thought about that a dog doesn't think like we do. Mm-hmm. That's almost impossible to think about.
Sure.
And then when you realize it, it's, so obviously the standard training for humans wouldn't work.
Yeah. The interesting thing is the principles of psychology are constant. They're effective most predominantly in terms of, if you think of it from operant conditioning, which is a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot in the dog training world, which is usually synonymous with positive reinforcement or positive only training, but it's not. And the way I look at operant conditioning is that there's 4 quadrants that I don't care how you're training, you're going to be in one of those 4 quadrants at some at all times. Now granted, you may, and myself included, I predominantly hover in the positive reinforcement quadrant. But, yesterday in the video, I'm in the positive punishment quadrant where I'm giving a dog a correction for getting aggressive with another dog. And so, but the reason I bring that up is that, to kind of address the point that you just made is that, from a training standpoint, you've got to understand why things are happening in conjunction with understanding that, how they think, with it being different, the principles may be the same. The medium in which we're communicating them are very different, and that's really the benchmark difference between explaining things to adults or even kids is that you've got to have that understanding of how to communicate, how it's happening, why it's happening, and then how actually to communicate it. And again, it's nonverbal communication and it's reinforcement. Those are the 2 things. One of the most common questions I get asked by more mainstream folks is, people are very anti-prong collar or remote collar, giving a dog punishment for any reason, and it's unfortunately kind of the society we live in. The reality of it is that while I'd say 85 to 90% of the training I conduct is positive, and one thing you'll realize very quickly, almost to a fault in the video series, is that I always stop and think, is there a positive method in which we can accomplish this goal without punishing a dog? And almost always there is. Mm-hmm. And I always, I walk you through this kind of checklist of, have I tried this? Yes. Did it work? No. Almost like a lightning diagram of going down this list of try this, no, try that,
mm-hmm.
And at some point with some dogs, you may get to where you physically correct them, and it's okay, just like it is with people. I mean, there are some people that just need their ass kicked.
I like that physical correction of people.
Yes,
but the analogy I like to use is say a second or third grade classroom, and that if if a teacher walks into a 3rd grade classroom and it's just pure chaos, the kids are playing tag and tipping desks over and throwing stuff at each other and screaming, and she walks in and just says, hey, okay, everybody listen to me, and starts writing on a chalkboard, and nobody's going to learn anything. They're not even going to pay attention. There has to be a certain amount of respect, consequences, etc. But on the other side of the token, is that if she or he walks in and the kids are, they piss themselves, and they sit up straight and they are deathly afraid of getting their heads caved in or their knuckles slapped with rulers to where
mm-hmm.
that's all they're thinking about now too. Guess what? They're not learning anything with that either. Yeah. So there has to be a positive learning environment for the dog, but it has to be under the the assumption that there is a certain level of respect there. And so that has to happen first. That's the foundation, is that there has to be that trust, that bond, that relationship, some level of respect. If the dog is yanking your pants and ripping a sandwich out of your hand and mounting you on your couch and has absolutely no respect for who you are, like that has to happen first.
Yeah.
And so I do talk about that. There's two different videos. I call them Be the Man Part 1 and Part 2. That shows me very visually showcasing, if I let the dog be a prick to me, he's going to do it. Just like a 3-year-old kid, if you let him pull your hair and slap you and take food from you, like he's going to do it.
Yeah.
But if I transfer over into quote unquote being the man, I'm not hitting the dog. I'm not being violent with him. It's a presence. It's how I'm carrying myself, and you can see it very, very black and white. Of me, being a puss basically and letting him do whatever he wants and pull my card and bully me, and then I transition right back into, you're not doing that with me, and I'm going to show you why you're not going to do it, and you can see it. And so understanding how to be able to accomplish that is kind of the first step, and that's probably the most common issue I see with people, is that they don't know how to get their dog to respect them, and it's the conversation of saying, hey, people say, well, I rub on the dog and I take him for walks, I let him sleep in the bed, I give him treats, and he just doesn't listen to me. It's like, if you're at a bar and somebody throws themselves at you, do you like that? Do you enjoy it? Well, yeah. Do you respect them for it? No.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's the same thing with a dog. Of course, he loves getting attention and being spoiled. It doesn't mean he respects you for it. And so you've got to understand that. And so most times, people are presenting themselves to the dog in a manner in which he's not going to respect them, and another analogy, I'm a big analogy guy so that people can relate, is that, when people say my dog he's just a wild man, doesn't listen, whatever, usually, do you have kids? Do they listen to you? No. There's probably a consistency there.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is, I say, if you walked into a boardroom with the 12 most powerful executives at your company and you're tasked with giving a presentation, and that presentation, your career depends on it, and you walk in there and you interact with those 12 executives the way that you interact with your dog, how would that presentation go? And almost everybody says, well, I'd be laughed out of the building, I'd be fired. Well, that's why your dog doesn't listen to you, because he's going to view you how you present yourself to him. So if you present yourself to him like an emotionally unstable, petulant clown, he's going to view you as such. So you can't just assume that he understands who you are in the relationship if you haven't shown him that. So, again, they're all very basic principles that once they're explained and shown, like it's pretty easy to comprehend and understand, and it's actually fairly easy to apply if you're willing to put the time in. It's not that you have to become a professional dog trainer and spend 20 hours a week doing it. But you do have to realize that, not unlike any other aspect of your life, is you're going to get what you put in.
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool, man. Your perspective is really interesting on that, and
Definitely.
I definitely look forward to checking that out.
Yeah.
So since this is Gear Tasting Radio, I want to just briefly discuss kind of what you take as far as a loadout with your canine.
Sure.
Like if you were, let's just take a typical scenario. You were going to go take your dog for a walk, let's say in a nature park or something like that, and you knew you were going to be away from home for a while. What would you take to kind of sustain that?
Sure. So the way I always look at a loadout is not unlike any operation in the military or any of my other experiences related, is that it's working backwards basically. It's where am I at? What am I doing? What am I trying to accomplish? And then deciding, okay, what do I need gear-wise to support that? While I am a worst-case scenario kind of guy, obviously you can take that to an extreme in which you're just being obnoxious about it almost.
Sure.
So I try to avoid that. But to me, there are some kind of benchmark things. I mean, the kit that you showed earlier, I think, is a very good basic kit. That's a good start. And that you've got the Boo Boo Plus kit that has, from a medical standpoint, it's pretty all-encompassing. I would add the Vetterson, the Sam Splint. Just because I do what I do in terms of training, I always look at every opportunity that I'm interacting with my dog as an opportunity to train and, more importantly, reinforce. So I like to always have multiple things that I can reward or reinforce a dog for, because that is their paycheck. And again, if you're thinking about it, algebraically or like a calculator, is that, if my dog does anything that I like, I want to reinforce that. And the most poignant and simple statement I use constantly as it relates to dog training was by B.F. Skinner, who's the godfather of operant conditioning, is that, he said, any behavior that's reinforced is likely to occur again. Like, it's super simple, but it's so true. And if you just always think that, you can't lose. The one catch with that is that it's not just the good stuff. And that's where so many people screw up, is that they are inadvertently creating undesirable behaviors. Most behavioral issues in dogs have been created by their owners without realizing it. A simple example is, dogs that just totally spaz out when you grab the leash, to the point where if they're super active, like you can't even get the leash on them, it's a fight, and it's a total pain in the ass. And people say, well, he knows we're going for a walk and whatever. But, again, think about how that context was created, is that, what started that? You grab the leash, that plus what? Plus walking, hooking it to him, walking out the door and going for a walk. Well, he made that simple association. So how do you created it, how do you uncreate it? Grab the leash and make it not associate that. So I'll go grab the leash, he spazzes out, I wrap it around my waist, clip it to myself, and sit down and watch a movie. And then I go put it back up and we don't go for a walk, and if you think of it like a piggy bank, and he's got 4,000 coins that make that association, well, now I need to put a bunch of coins in there that break it, and so that's how I do it, with the same, pick any problem, is that think about it in reverse of how did I create it, because most likely you did and just didn't realize it. And then that's essentially, you're going to do the same thing in reverse to break that,
So with the treats, you just have like a small bag of treats with you when you go places, and
yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where it depends on the dog. You know, if the dog has low food drive, then it's like offering a kid Brussels sprouts for doing their homework. If he doesn't care about them, then it doesn't do you a whole lot of good. So you got to know your dog, know what motivates him. I like to always have those things with me in spades too. I mean, I'll have a treat pouch with them handy, a clicker. And that's how I communicate with them. So I like to always do that. It can be something as simple as, the dog's healing nicely or didn't pay attention to something, I'll mark it and reward it or whatever. So I kind of always gear what I'm bringing around what am I working on, and I always like to work on stuff, because you can't overtrain really when it comes to reinforcement and shaping. Above and beyond that, it's gonna, is it hot? If it's hot, we're probably gonna carry a little more water than if it's not. If I know I'm going to be in an environment where there's lots of cactus or thorns or things like that, I may focus a little heavier on the medical aspect of it, or bringing dog booties. So the environment and weather and what we're trying to accomplish, even if it's completely recreational, are going to kind of drive the loadout trip to trip. But I in terms of bare necessities, the kit that you showed, I think, is a really good starting point, and then maybe a little heavier on the reinforcement, treats and tugs or balls or whatever to keep them engaged. But.
So, are you a fan of carrying all that gear that kind of supports your dog yourself in a bag that you would have, or are you a fan of putting that on the dog?
For me, I would probably carry it. Not necessarily, and it's not. I'm not saying that you shouldn't put it on the dog, or that I. Don't condone it or whatever. I just, for me, and again, this is probably different than most people in that, just about every time I take a dog out, I'm working on something with them. There's a, kind of I call it a craze. I mean, there's a trend a little bit of like these workouts with your dog type stuff. And it's, they're popular and people love doing it, and that's great. For me, just like with this, like if I'm working out, I'm focused on my goals for the workout. Yeah. If I'm conditioning or training the dog, I'm focused on what they need. I don't like to mix those two things. So if I'm taking a dog out and doing something with him, like I don't want anything distracting him, or whatever, unless, if my goal is to get him comfortable with a harness with weight on it because he's going to be needing to carry it, then yeah, absolutely. That kind of sucks the fun out of a hike for a lot of people, but I just... call me utilitarian. I mean, I'm just kind of hardwired that way, and that, I always try to get the most bang for my buck. I don't care what I'm doing. If I'm going to Target, like how many other things can I wrap into it? You know, like
Sure.
So I view it that same way as just trying to maximize every time. I mean, probably the most valuable lesson I've learned in my first almost 40 years on the planet is that time is the one thing that it's by far the most valuable. You know, and so
Can never get it back.
Yeah, and you know, and everybody has the same amount. Doesn't matter how rich you are, how poor you are, how old you are. You get the same amount of time every day. So how you use it, to me, I mean, that's the most valuable thing. You know, that's why I need to wrap this interview up here. But yeah, so you know, I just look at everything that way. You know, and so I know most people may say, you know, hey, lighten up, just take your dog for a hike and enjoy it, and I do. I mean, I still enjoy it, but I just try to maximize it. But
Nice.
That's awesome.
Do you have any favorites as far as brand goes for, you know, kind of what you use? I know you mentioned the Vetericyn, but like, do you have any treats that you prefer, food that you prefer?
You know, for me, again, the palate of the dog is going to dictate the treats to a certain extent. Having said that, I still try to go with healthier options because some of the training methodologies I use will actually be feeding a dog through training. Or training a dog through feeding, depending on how you want to look at it, and that every calorie that they ingest comes from my hand via reinforcement, which I'll do with some dogs for several days or even a few weeks. So keeping that in mind, like you can't do that with liver treats. You know, a dog can't eat 2 pounds of liver treats every day. You know, so I like the frozen Biljack for both treats and food because you can use it for both. It's balanced enough to be able to use as a food. It's not something I would feed for years, but you can feed it for weeks, no problem, or even months, frankly. That's what it's designed for, but it has a consistency of like Play-Doh. So you can use it for a training treat, and I use it, you know, a lot. But anything that's healthy that has, you know, doesn't have a bunch of wheat and flour and corn, soy, glutens, beet pulp, stuff like that, just a bunch of garbage in it. You know, the more preservatives and crap in it, you know, obviously the worse it's going to be. So I try to be a little cognizant of that. But again, you know, a lot of it's going to be dependent on the dog. Same with the toys. Some dogs, you know, are more driven for a ball on a string or a little leather tug or a chuck-it ball or a tennis ball or a Kong with peanut butter in it or whatever. I mean, I like to use whatever I know the dog likes the most, you know, so that if I'm working with him, you know, again, you know, hiking is a good example of, you know, you're going out there if you want to work on some distractions. The dog likes to chase squirrels or rabbits or whatever. You can keep him engaged enough with you. Naturally, I want to use something that he's going to be the most motivated for so that I can keep his attention on me and not what he's distracted by. But
yeah, good points. Yeah, well, thanks for coming by, man. I really appreciate all your insight into the training aspects and even the gear. And
yeah, absolutely.
It's been great.
Just for those that, you know, if you want to check out the training thing, it's MikeRitland.com. And it's just, again, it's a year at a time, but you get it as a monthly lesson. And there's usually, you know, a couple of different lessons and a blog post and things like that. So it's quite a bit of information, breaks down to $7 a month. And for sure, I think you're getting your money's worth on it.
Absolutely, man. And I know you brought the harness and the lead and stuff like that to check out too. That's stuff that's going to... Where can you get that again? Yeah,
it's for sale as of now. We've had it out for a couple months now. It's workingdogdrygoods.com. It's kind of a mouthful, but if you just Google Working Dog Dry Goods, it'll come up, and they have a Tricos tab that has our collar and leash, and it's made. You know, it was a collaboration project just for us that we designed with them, and so it's got our name and logo on it, and it's only sold in that capacity. So,
yeah, for those of you that aren't familiar with that, we went over that on our gear tasting video show. And if you'd like to check out more information on that, Mike kind of walked us through, you know, the design principles behind it. So definitely check out our video there too. And
one last thing, you had mentioned that you were wanting to run a discount code. Do you know what that code's going to be?
Yeah, so for anybody listening to this, any ITS members, it's just going to be ITS Tactical is the coupon code, and that's 15% off of the price. And I'm not sure how long it's going to run, but from whatever date that this airs, it'll be, you know, at least a few days. So
awesome.
Jump on that and get you a screaming deal while you're at it.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming by, Mike, and it was great having you.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm going to tear into these Skittles now.
And if we'll put some links in the episode intel, so if you guys want to check out anything that Mike's been talking about, there'll be a special section for you to check out some links there. And remember, if you like what we're doing here on Gear Tasting Radio, please subscribe and give us a rating and review on iTunes, and tune in every Tuesday. Thanks again.